Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for where I'm from. Welcome to the latest Symphony 3 webinar, The Return of Wisdom. Delighted to be joined by Professor Ronan McDonald. How are you, Ronan?
Very well, Fergal. Thanks very much.
Really looking forward to this. While we're waiting on people just to join us, I just might kick off with a few comments and let you prepare, Ronan. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands and who we're meeting today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us on the call. As we gather virtually from different parts of the country, I invite each of you to take a moment to reflect on the traditional owners of the lands where you are today. So a little bit of housekeeping to kick us off. We've got Ronan here who's going to talk for about 40 minutes. I'll do obviously 5 minutes, bit of an introduction. But really, anyone who's been on these calls before will know that we keep it pretty informal. We're delighted to have our guests join us and help us impart their information and their wisdom. So no question is a bad question. Pop it into the Q&A section or the chat section. We'll pick them up and we'll ask them. What I might do, Ronan, is ask some of the questions as we're going through your talk, and then we'll keep some of them till the end. We try and get everybody out by at the top of the hour, but if we've got questions, keep going. So we'll close it out informally, but we're happy to stay on and keep the conversation going. For anybody who's joining us, this session will be recorded, and we do share it on YouTube and some of the socials afterwards, so just be aware of that. So, just a little bit about Symphony 3. I think a lot of you are return webinar attendees, but Symphony 3, we've been around since 2011, dedicated to local government. So we've worked in over 120 local governments around Australia and New Zealand. We build powerful digital experiences for councils and help integrate those digital experiences deeply into their core systems and processes using our Smart Glue platform. So we've got about 50 plus platform clients. So they're councils who work with us on a yearly basis and have been with us for a long time. And we've created, I guess, a community around our clients. And one of the things we like to do is give back to the sector with a little bit of thought leadership and conversations like the one we're having today. So welcome to everybody. Some of the clients you'll see on the next screen. And I know we've got many of you on the call today, so welcome to everybody. In terms of the agenda, as I said, I'm nearly done with my talk. We'll then hand over to Ronan, and Ronan's going to talk to us about all things AI. Not a technical talk, I might add, but I think we'll all find it very, very interesting. So I'll let Ronan talk through his agenda when the time comes. And then we'll open up for a Q&A at the end. So pretty simple, straightforward agenda. Final thing to talk about, just a bit of a plug. So if you find today's conversation interesting and you want to hear more from Symphony 3 and other thought leaders in kind of the AI space, you might be interested in the AI Innovate conference, which is happening at Melbourne Town Hall. Michael Fagan, who's an advisor to Symphony 3, is one of the esteemed speakers there, and I know that we're also running a panel discussion where we will have people from the City of Bendigo, Noosa Council and Warrnambool City Council speaking. So sign up for that. It's a good couple of days, and anything you don't learn with Ronan this morning, you're sure to learn at the AI Innovate conference. So on to today's speaker and today's session. I guess this has come around like every other business. Symphony 3 is coming to terms with AI. There's two things we're doing. We're helping deliver, and we're delivering AI solutions for our council clients. And we've also committed to become an AI first business. So we're trying to challenge everything we do in our own business and drive AI and become AI first. And this has led us to a lot of questions around, how do we work? How do we employ the right people? What are the right skills we need to get in our staff? How do we train them? How do we lead teams in an AI world? How do we make better decisions in an AI world? And really, in some respects, this goes to the heart of the relationship between technology and humanity. So we thought, what better person to come and talk to us than Professor Ronan McDonald, who I think is an expert in the humanities. Ronan, would that be fair to say?
Well, I certainly work in the humanities. I'm not sure if I'm an expert in humanity. I'm more comfortable with the plural. But I am. I'm really happy to be here. So thanks very much for the invitation. The humanities. I had a colleague outside the university when I worked in UNSW a few years ago who used to always call them the inhumanities. But the word humanities, which I'm sure all your viewers will know, refers to the arts subjects. There's the old humanities and the new humanities. My originary discipline is English, but more recently I've been looking at the value of humanities, and I'm currently working on a book called Critical Attention, which is about how the humanities historically have dealt with and treated attention. So so that's an interest of mine. Humanities is a big word, though. Isn't it?
We won't get you to cover the whole lot over in the course of an hour. You've got plenty else to talk about. But while you're getting your slide deck up, maybe just give us a quick bio of yourself. And I obviously know you pretty well. You're a great friend of Symphony 3. You're a professor at Melbourne University. But how have you arrived to where you are now? What's this?
I came to Melbourne University to take up a chair of Irish Studies in the School of Culture and Communication in 2018. Doesn't feel like I've been here for 8 years because of COVID, but 8 years ago. And 8 years before then, I moved from London to UNSW in Sydney. So I've been in Australia for 16 years, and I did my DPhil in Oxford before then. And I'm from Dublin, as my accent might attest. Did not know Fergal in those happy Dublin years. Only got to know Fergal really in the last 7 or 8 years. And I have never been to a Symphony 3 webinar before, whether as an attendee or a speaker. So it's a great honour to be here speaking to you today. And I understand more than 100 people have registered. I'm not sure. I can't really tell how many people are looking at me, but more than 100 people.
Three.
Very good. We'll probably drop out as we proceed. Delighted to be here. And I guess we should, given your business and in Symphony 3, in technology, and given the subject of the talk, we better get the technicals right. So I might then just share my slideshow, unless there's anything else more you want to say, Fergal, by way of preparation.
While you're getting set up, Ronan, I'll be taking the questions. If there's questions coming through on chat, and I can see a few comments, I'll pick out the really sticky ones and ask them of you as you're going through your conversation.
Okay.
In your presentation.
Great. So look, I'll move quickly. I'm going to put a timer on to make sure I don't go more than 40 minutes. You flagged this already, but let me emphasize that I'm not here as a technical expert in artificial intelligence, and I'm not going to tell you which model to use or how to write a better prompt or how to automate customer service pipeline. There are, of course, many people, including some on this chat, some of the boffins and experts of Symphony 3 who would be able to help with that. And I should also say, by way of preface, I think any talk on AI needs a certain humility, because the range, even those who work very closely with it, technically in every other way, there's the range of predictions is extraordinary, sometimes even in the same person. I'm thinking of how someone like Elon Musk, for example, goes from extreme optimism to extreme pessimism, imagining a world of effortless abundance, no money, no work, or else the total collapse of civilization, with only the occasional Terminator picking off remaining human survivors. So given that range of predictions, and given the fact that it's still embedding, the technology is still embedding, it's advancing rapidly, but the cultural and civilizational response is in process too. And some of the things I'm going to say, I think, will illustrate that. We don't yet know. The full impact of AI is still unfolding. And anyone who speaks about it with perfect certainty is probably trying to sell you something. So my own contribution today comes from a different place, from predictions or from the technical side. As Fergal intimated, I'm an academic working in the humanities in the University of Melbourne, and working specifically in criticism, attention and the value of the humanities. So I'm not offering today a technical briefing, but more of a reflective argument with a little bit of history and philosophy thrown in. Though I hope some of what I say may be of some practical use, or some may clarify some practical questions, especially for leaders thinking about judgment, responsibility, and human capability in an AI-enabled world. What I want to consider is a challenge that is becoming more and more unavoidable for us all. Specifically, what happens to human judgment when machines become very good at sounding as if they know what they are doing? That's why I've called the talk, as my first slide showed, the return of wisdom, judgment in a world of plausible machines. Now, when I used the word wisdom, I kind of was aware of that, and I was talking to Fergal about possible titles, and he was really keen on the word wisdom, and I was wondering, does it not sound a bit antiquated? What are its associations? Solomon or Socrates or Obi-Wan Kenobi or maybe Morgan Freeman, the cryptic line or the aphorism. And that's not the sense that I'm using the word today. Wisdom, in the sense that I'm using it, draws on the idea of judgment refined by first-hand experience, which is one of the qualities one would hope to find in leadership. So I don't mean by the word nostalgia or moral superiority, and certainly not hostility to technology. I mean something much more practical: the capacity to evaluate what matters in a concrete situation when the facts are incomplete, the rules do not quite settle the issue, and different values pull in different directions. A more particular word is the Greek word phronesis. They had a word which is usually translated as practical wisdom, that word phronesis. It's not the same as technical skill, techne, or knowledge, episteme. It's a particular sense. I decided not to put the word phronesis in the title because nobody would have come. But nonetheless, I think that sort of individualized, that kind of discrimination, practical wisdom, the ability to ask what should be done here and now with these people, under these constraints and with these consequences. And I suppose my argument is that question, that human function, becomes more important, not less, in the age of AI, practical wisdom. I'm going to start off with a story that some of you may even recall, and it's drawn from my own industry, university education. In early June, there was a bit of an embarrassing mini scandal in The Age in the Sydney Morning Herald. Fergal and I are both involved in the Celtic Club in Melbourne, and we had the editor of The Age there last week giving a business lunch, and he recalled this event in broad terms. But I think it's instructive. The event happened when Kylie Moore-Gilbert, who's an academic but became very well known because she was hostage by Iran for 2 years, but she had written a column arguing that she'd advised her stepdaughter to think twice about going to university, because students could now outsource so much work and perhaps some of the learning itself to generative AI. Now, in response to this article, which got a lot of comment, was widely shared, and loss of credibility for universities, the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Quality and Integrity from Western Sydney University, Kath Ellis, wrote a reply. And her argument was not that there's no AI problem, but that universities are adapting and students should go, and that students are being taught not to use AI to cut corners or to outsource thinking. So far, so reasonable. However, The Guardian Australia did a little bit of research by running Kath Ellis's article through Pangram, an AI detection tool, And Ellis's article turned out to be AI generated itself. So the article arguing against AI turned out to be AI generated. I have to say, 10,000 academics started looking up Pangram, the AI detection tool, to see what it was when this article broke, because no one had heard of it. But nonetheless, it was kind of a little mini scandal. Western Sydney, in response to The Guardian, kind of obviously finding a scoop against their rival, The Age, acknowledged that she'd used Microsoft Copilot in drafting the article, but the university defended it as sophisticated and an appropriate AI use. Now, the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald took a different view, and the article was removed from the masthead. So the interesting thing about that story and what we might learn from it is not in the gotcha or the irony of this PVC for quality and integrity being found out like this. It's what happens when AI use, disclosure, authorship, and institutional trust become publicly contestable. So we have here this useful tool, but the norms are not yet clear, particularly around issues of authorship and ambiguity around authorship, the reputational risk both to the Age, but also, of course, to the university, and where private intention clashes with public meaning. And this is why the case matters beyond university. Once AI produces something that appears under your name, your role, or your organization's authority, the question is no longer simply, did the tool work? It becomes, who is speaking here? What should have been disclosed? Who stands behind it? And this takes us, I think, to the next question, which is not, I think, let me clarify what the next question, what I think the question should be. Is AI really intelligent? What matters is not whether AI is really intelligent, but whether AI can now imitate the outward form of not just of thought, but of writing. It can certainly produce fluent language, structured argument, plausible recommendation, while leaving human beings responsible for judgment, meaning, and consequence. So the questions for leaders is not only how do we use AI, it is also what kinds of judgment do we need to preserve, cultivate, and make visible when machines can seem to think for us. There's a strong argument that AI, artificial intelligence, should be called simulated intelligence, because a lot of it is in the seeming. And there are fascinating philosophical questions around the Turing test and whether AI really understands. Does it have consciousness? Does it have intention? Does it know what it's saying? Does it have that sense of being conscious and having an experiential self that philosophers call qualia? My own view to all those questions, and probably many people, including the technical people here, will have different ones, is no, it doesn't have qualia. But for many practical purposes, that may not be the first question we have to ask or worry about. A white-collar worker might say to their manager, but ChatGPT does not possess real intellect. It has no consciousness, no inwardness, no experience, no experience of meaning. And the manager may reply, that may be true, but it turns out I did not need those things. I didn't need qualia. I needed a draft, a summary, a table, a briefing note, a set of options, a risk register, a plausible response to a complaint. So that's the uncomfortable practical reality. AI does not need to be humanly intelligent in order to displace many of the things human intelligence has been paid to do. It does not need to possess wisdom in order to produce the appearance of careful thought. It does not need to possess judgment or the capacity of judgment in order to produce valuations. It does not need to understand meaning in order to generate language that organizations may treat as meaningful. So the question is not, is this machine really thinking? It is what happens to human beings, professions, and organizations when machines can imitate the outward forms of thinking very well, and more pointedly, what human capacities become more important when so many performances of intelligence can be simulated and automated.
Ronan, you might touch on this later on, but where my mind is going, we've talked about, I suppose, simulated intelligence coming up with answers, and then wisdom to make an ultimate decision on maybe some of that intelligence. I think some of the things, or one of the things that we're grappling at in businesses, is wisdom you just don't become wise. Wisdom is acquired by making decisions and learnings, and I guess building your intelligence over a period of years, really, or many years. I don't know if you've got thoughts on that, or whether you're going to touch on that. How are we going to acquire wisdom is probably a question I would have in the future.
Well, I suppose one of the definitions I gave is judgment, good judgment, married to experience, tutored experience. I think there is a real systemic issue at the moment in all types of professions about entry-level jobs being replaced by AI in the legal profession, in accountancy, in consultancy. No doubt my own profession, it'll happen. No doubt coding. All these things are being replaced. Now, often apprenticeship happened in those roles, and people kind of picked up experience through doing those roles. I think one of the issues that will have to be exercised across various different professions is how succession happens and how people get trained, how people gather the requisite experience. But what I think, as long as there is responsibility, and there is responsibility, which I'll come on to, and that the organization and the individuals, real humans, have to take responsibility. There was a case in Canada a few years ago where somebody was given misinformation by one of the chatbots for Air Canada, and they took a case against Air Canada who tried to disown responsibility because of the chatbot. The chatbot should be responsible, and it was said no. Ultimately, the organization is responsible. So as long as there is responsibility, there will have to be human input and human oversight. And given that AI is going to be is derivative, it's using data sets which exist now. Even if it produces its own data sets, it could be secondarily derivative. There will be a human. There'll have to be a human input. But the issue of succession is one that I think is bigger than I can deal with now, and training. Perhaps there'll have to be different entry routes in order to provide the judges and evaluators which are going to be needed.
Yeah, just on your point, I was trying to type it into the public chat there, but apparently my mic is my keyboard's pretty loud. Your example on that article has been played out, of course, with some of the Big Four reports where it's been found that consultants have been providing, reports that have been AI generated. I also wonder, from an ethical point of view, we should be using AI. Is it just a matter of letting people know where AI has been used? Have you got any thoughts on that? I do. I
come a bit to that at the end of this talk, where I talk about owning and accountability. I think accountability is really important. I think we are at a moment when the etiquette and the norms of using this are still settling, and I think I think probably first draftism is going to become something which people, my prediction. I started off by saying we predict at our peril. People who produce a report needs to be responsible for it, and ideally it should have some of the grain of human voice. So I think another point of where we use it and when we work alongside it is applying continual friction. And I think that's part of judgment. It's when to apply human friction against AI smoothness. It doesn't mean not using it, but it does mean using it together well. Otherwise, there's a certain blandness, I think, that will come in to writing, but also to thinking, and that's a danger. So we got to preserve judgment, but we've got to preserve the grain and the sinew of human thought against a kind of seductive smoothness that AI is producing.
Question. come through, which I might throw it at you. I know I'm probably taking you off piste a little bit, but
all right.
Olivia, thanks for the question. At what point is the right point to disclaim AI has assisted in pieces of work? If humans remain responsible, when is it necessary? So
I
when
think
should you?
I think it will become commonplace for people to say AI has been used in the drafting of this report, or AI has been used in the writing of this essay. I mean, I asked the editor of The Age, or someone asked the editor of The Age, I can't remember if it was me, who gave a talk last week, how much AI is your journalists using? And he said, very, very commonly. So I think this is becoming kind of like something which is omnipresent but widely unacknowledged, because the etiquette of using it and the perhaps shame of using it, and still is a question of shame, hasn't yet settled. But it is why, obviously, I think we all know experientially, we all know in our own lives, we all know from observing the way the world is going, that it is being used extremely widely.
Yeah.
And I think when that ownership, I think ethical use of AI and good judgment is actually owning that it has been used. But of course, responsibility for everything that one publishes under one's own name, and everything that comes out from an organization, everything a council does remains with the council or organization. That is a huge motivation to check and avoid and pull back and slow down. Often what's required is a counterpoint of slowness to AI's fastness in order to notice better.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, we use the common term or the cliche is the human in the loop, but I like your human friction against AI's smoothness. I think that's a really nice way to put it, actually.
But it'll also mean that we have to acquire new skills. We also have to start. In some ways, we're used to the idea of AI about speed, acceleration, swiftness of production, and we now don't have to read because we can summarize. But if what I'm saying is true, there will be a need for a certain strategic slowness in order for us to apply that friction, in order for us to exercise human judgment to counteract something which is beguilingly swift and seemingly smooth.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, I'm just moving on. Then I think I got 20 minutes left, so that's good. I'm making good progress. But I do think that there is a role for perhaps discriminating between kinds of mental power. There are lots of taxonomies or ways of breaking down. Psychologists talk about this, but it might be good in thinking where the human element or where the human in the loop might be exercised. It might be good to thinking about, well, what is it that the human judgment, wisdom, phronesis can use. At the most basic level, there's calculation, working something out according to rules. Machines have long been able to do that better than us. Then there's reasoning, or to use an older word, ratiocination, moving from premises to conclusions, comparing options, drawing inferences, producing a chain of thought. AI is certainly very good at the outward performance of reasoning. And then there's knowledge, not just producing a sentence, but knowing a field, a history, a set of practices, a body of evidence. Then there is understanding, grasping what kind of situation one is in, seeing the point, knowing what is central and what is peripheral, recognizing tone, context, motive, irony, risk, embarrassment, human consequence. And again, I think AI is pretty good at that too. Judgment, AI is certainly good at echoing, deciding what should be done. But wisdom or phronesis is not simply having more information or processing it faster or operating according to basic evaluations. Wisdom, as I'm understanding it here, is that judgment disciplined by experience, proportion, responsibility, and I think ethical insight. That's what kind of, I suppose, seasons mere everyday judgment and evaluation into human wisdom. It's the capacity to ask what matters here, in this moment, in this circumstance, which hasn't been perhaps occurred exactly before. What's at stake? What might be missing? Who is affected? And who owns the consequences? and it's articulating those quite clearly and knowing when to articulate. That seems to me germane to leadership in the age of AI. And that's why I'm invoking this word phronesis as a sense of practical wisdom, not just abstract cleverness or aphoristic nuggets or technical skill, but judgment in action with experience. I'm going to just borrow one of the perhaps more prominent thinkers about AI is Brian Cantwell Smith, who wrote a book which is lots of treatments of AI are rapidly becoming obsolete. But Smith makes this philosopher of AI makes a useful distinction between reckoning and judgment. AI is becoming great at reckoning, calculating, classifying, predicting, and generating plausible answers. But judgment is not just more reckoning. It is asking what matters, really entering those value questions. What is at stake? What can be ignored? What must not be ignored? And who bears the consequences? So AI, and this is crucial, and this is what the motive for this human in the loop is, gives us the appearance of considered thought, often beguilingly, without the burden of responsibility. And one of the first principles of responsible AI leadership is owning that responsibility. The system can draft, classify, recommend, explain, or evaluate, but the organization still answers for what is done with it. So judgment cannot be laundered through the tool. The tool can facilitate judgment, but it can't launder responsibility for those judgments. It's also worth pointing out that, it's obvious to say this, but we need perhaps to be aware of it, that we are probably facing over the next few years, bearing in mind my initial remarks about humility, the redundancy of lots of common human competencies. Lots of things that people are used to doing, that we're used to doing, we've probably been trained to do, we probably do as second nature, are going to be done by this new technology. So I'm thinking of such things as writing competent first drafts, summarizing complex material, searching in a different way, searching more patiently, even translating between languages or producing professional tone or remembering procedures, doing technical troubleshooting or forming an initial view before we develop a polished answer. All those things which we're used to doing we may become less practiced at, and they may even become redundant. Some of those losses may not matter very much, and some may be liberating. We shouldn't, I think, get sentimental about drudgery. And many clerical tasks which are boring, will perhaps we can bid a welcome goodbye to them. But some losses may matter a great deal because they're not merely old tasks. They are part of the way we learn to judge. So, and this I think pertains to your question about apprenticeship and learning experience. If AI writes the first draft, do we still develop the capacity to find our own thought? If AI summarizes the report, do we still know what has been left out? If AI gives us the options, do we still learn how to frame the problem? If AI produces the tone of sympathy, do we still cultivate the virtue behind it? I'm imagining a scenario in which someone has to write a sympathy email to someone and they use AI to do so. What's being lost there? What skills are being lost? So it's not the question of whether AI will change human competence. It will. The wiser question is which competence can we afford to lose, and which must we preserve because they allow us to judge the machine's work, so that they allow us to fulfill our role of competency by the side. On this question,
interestingly enough, Ronan, just to interject,
yeah.
there, I'm looking at, say, first draft. So a council writing something or putting together a report or a recommendation or a strategy for its community, using AI to go through all those steps that you've put in there. I wonder, does something get lost if we're looking at the judgment almost at the end of the process, in terms of delivering to our stakeholders, delivering to the community? Are we abrogating our responsibility until the end and missing out on the nuances by letting AI do some of the heavy lifting for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess it's going to happen. It's people are just going to start using it, and I think what will happen, what I hope will happen, is that other competencies will come to replace some of the ones that are lost. I think in writing something, often thinking comes with writing. And if you get a AI to write something for you, an AI draft for you, and I mean, I see this with my teaching and indeed my own writing, you might lose a lot of the texture and the grain. But I think what will happen is that we will start to push against AI's initial drafts and hopefully, brush it against the grain. We all have to learn to brush against the grain. But yeah, this is where judgment needs to take place. I mean, let me put it this way. We have outsourced the capacity. We've outsourced the long ago outsourced arithmetic, but we still teach our kids how to do sums. Okay, because that's a competency we don't actually want to lose. It will take a mental furnishing too far. We also probably translating languages is going to become more and more automated, more easy to automate. But I still think we need to teach languages, because there are other skills other than the actual simple translation that is lost there. So I think, again, to go back to the earlier question about how this settles and where it settles, we have yet to find. But I do think that we need to recognize the loss of competency within a wider sense in which competencies have been lost before. Perhaps we should mourn those losses, but other times we've barely noticed them. We don't. I mean, for example, one of the when writing emerged, there was a huge worry that the human capacity of memorization would be lost. This occurs in Plato's Phaedra. There's a worry that human capacity to memorize would be lost. And it is certainly true that over hundreds of years, with every new technological revolution, our capacity to memorize, which our ancestors would have been, our literate ancestors would be far, far better at. Learning stories to retell, but even, and that's our pre-literate ancestors, but even, for example, in Renaissance Europe, the number of people who knew the Bible off by heart, it would be unthinkable now. That's just not something we've lost. There's a loss in that, but it's also just recognizing that competencies go, new competencies come. We don't mend and weave and hunt the way we used to. Search engines have changed how we remember. We should still spell. I think we don't want to lose the capacity to spell, even if spell check has improved our spelling. So I think one of the areas for judgment is which competencies do we need to protect? And this also pertains to your question about training and apprenticeship in order to grow the capacity of judgment. We should not lose...
Sorry, Ron.
Okay, that's all.
I've had a couple of comments come through, so I'll just read through them as you're going to the next slide. So Dave Ryan, spot on, Ronan, owning that AI has been used to produce a document or text and being able to stand by it, i.e. you have checked it and understand it, will be key. The ease of producing through AI may lead to laziness, which may result in not understanding the topic well enough to answer key questions, then needing to ask those questions of AI. And so seems like depth of understanding is still the key, otherwise it can just be regurgitation. Need to use understanding, empathy, etc. in order to demonstrate wisdom. Frank Wyatt, conversely, Ronan, having written a book recently, I then used AI to refine the context, the language, tone and examples to support an argument. Yeah.
Probably be very useful. I mean, I think it's probably useful at that end stage too.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions, but I'll hold those off till the end.
Okay, I'm gonna move through this slide quickly because I think I've already covered it in our conversation. I have a comment here about the Eloi in H.G. Wells's novel The Time Machine. I don't know if any of your readers are familiar with that, or its many spin-offs. He has these Eloi, which are people who've beautiful, delicate, leisured descendants of humanity, who live without labour, without difficulty, without much memory or courage, and without any practical competence. And their world looks really utopian, but of course it's totally dependence, because they've lost not only the old skills, but the habits of agency and judgment that went with them. That's what we want to avoid, becoming Eloi. But the question for AI leadership is not, will old competencies disappear? Some will. The question is, which disappearances leave us freer and which leave us more dependent than we can afford to be. What we cannot afford to lose, is our capacity to evaluate our machines and to take responsibility for them. And that might mean knowing when to maintain human friction, when to be the guide by the side, as I've tried to be suggesting here. I've only got a couple of slides left, which will give us a good deal of time. These are some of the losses. I think I've touched on them already, but let me just kind of maybe be a bit more specific about the judgment losses we should worry about. I think verification is an obvious one. If the AI gives us fluent answers and plausible citations, neat summaries and confident recommendations, we need the habit, and we need not to lose the habit, of asking, is this true? What has been left out? Where did it come from? Because at the moment, as we are increasing in our own literacy in this technology, it's easy to mistake fluency for evidence. And fluency is not evidence, and we need to learn that. But there are subtle, I think, losses too. One of them, I think we've already discussed a little bit, first draft thinking, because we often imagine that writing simply records thought, but very often writing is where thought happens. And the first awkward draft is where we discover what we mean, where the contradiction appears, where the missing step becomes visible, where we realize that the problem has been framed wrongly. So if AI gives us the first polished version, we may save time, but we also skip the version in which judgment begins to form. In that respect, I think it's another example of what I've said is the need for slowness, the need to counterbalance speed with slowness. One of the reasons that first draft thinking helps refine and produce judgment is because it's slow thinking, and we can see things we didn't see beforehand. So I think close reading, as we call it in English, has got a real role here, to be able to slow down and notice seams which are hidden, notice things which seem smooth, and roughen them. Voice is another thing on that slide, not just decoration. In organizations, the voice we talk about in terms of a writer's voice, but also I think the voice which implies ownership of any written text, a letter to a resident, a public apology, a staff announcement, response to a complaint. They're not just strings of competent sentences. They express authority, tact, care, firmness, and serious. They tell people who is speaking and what's being owned. AI imitates tone very well, but leaders still have to ask whether the tone is truthful, appropriate, and genuinely theirs. Institutional memory I've also there as I think a dangerous loss. Organizations often know things that are not in the policy document. Why a particular phrase inflamed the community last time, why a shortcut failed, why an apparently minor exception matters. AI may summarize the record, but it may not know the scars. Tolerance for ambiguity matters too. AI is very good at producing a clean answer. Sometimes that is helpful, but in leadership, the clean answer may arrive too early. In some situations, need hesitation, consultation, escalation, or simply the courage to say, this is not yet settled. And finally, and most importantly, responsibility. The most dangerous loss is that people begin to feel less responsible for the result because the answer came from somewhere else. So these are the losses that matter most, I think. Not task losses, but judgment losses or wisdom losses. The danger is not only that AI will do things for us, it is that we may stop developing, along with capacities that are obsolete, that can happily be obsolescent, that we lose the capacities that allow us to recognize whether the thing has been done well. So let me just come to a conclusion by just asking 5 questions, or to drawing attention, or proposing 5 questions for wise AI leadership. If the judgment losses to worry about verification, first draft thinking, voice, institutional memory, ambiguity and responsibility, then the leadership response is not simply to block AI or to issue a vague instruction to use it responsibly. The response is to make judgment visible at the points where it matters. So these 5 judging questions are: what to automate? Not everything that can be automated should be. The question is whether automation simply removes drudgery, or whether it removes a human capacity or part of a human training that we still need. Second, what to question? AI is fluent, but fluency is not evidence, however beguiling it might seem. Leaders need cultures in which plausible answers can still be challenged. Third, what to explain? Some decisions must not only be efficient, they must be intelligible to staff, clients, regulators, and the public. Fourth, what to escalate? A wise organization knows where speed should stop, where vulnerability, ambiguity, legal risk, reputational risk, or public trust requires human judgment. And fifth, who must remain accountable? The system, who and what must remain accountable. The system may draft, classify, recommend, or explain, but the organization still answers for what is done in its names. So these 5 questions are one way, as kind of a preliminary or heuristic questions, of turning wisdom from an abstract virtue into leadership practice. And it could be that, just final slide, that the future belongs not to those who automate most, but to those who know what not to automate. And thanks very much for your attention. I'm very happy to take any comments or questions here, or indeed independently.
So Ronan, I might, if you want to go back to that previous slide, maybe I'm guessing there's some leaders on the call who may have some answers to that, and maybe can throw them into the comments. I'll pick them up. I'm sorry, I've had to move because I've had an issue with my Wi-Fi, so my backdrop will be slightly different to what it was before. But that's the wonderful thing about webinars. Let me read out some of these comments while there's more coming through. So, Tara Fagan, in The Black Swan, Nassim Taleb wrote many years before ChatGPT that some academics were building knowledge by referencing other papers rather than engaging with reality. And some scholars often build theories by referencing other theories, not by observing the world. He said academics live in a citation loop, mistaking the map for the terrain. This judgment was being lost for a long time before AI, and indeed a case can be made that AI unleashes knowledge and makes it more available to the masses rather than minimises it. Would you agree? And that's a big question to unpack. So do you want to? I
definitely agree that AI makes knowledge available to the masses. I think that is a wonderful thing. I think that AI, in terms of pedagogy and teaching, I mean, AI can provide something that used to be the gold standard for an ideal teaching, which is one questioning person talking to another. Now, it needs to be overseen, but I can see really, really good uses for the AI in our education systems, as long as it's overseen, because AI obviously hallucinates and gets things wrong. But it can, it is a very good explainer. It's very lucid, and it's one-on-one, so it can meet a questioner where it is. So I think AI is the latest in a profound and really, really emancipatory democratization of knowledge, which began in the 15th century with the invention of print, and has certainly been accelerated in recent decades with something like the internet and information technology, digital technologies. To say that is not to be blindly utopian. There are lots of negative side things too. But I think the question of the democratization of knowledge is one that I think is absolutely true. And the question is how we can harness that in a way which enhances human well-being and minimizes the destructive threats of AI as well. The Taleb quote that academics just recite each other, I think, well, you'd have to there's a lot to be said about that. I think it's certainly true for lots of academia. But we all recite each other all the time. Human language is always recycled. And that's what we have to use. It's of its nature, shop-soiled. Most ideas. In fact, a wise person once said that unoriginality is a sign of truth. So I think in some ways the fresh and the novel can be overstated. Sometimes it's looking at old wisdom through new lenses that is the most insightful thing. But those are big questions, and I think you can take various angles on them. I think sometimes we find novelty in tradition is what my nugget response would be.
Great. Okay, I'll keep going. So Frank again, knowledge flows into organization, through organizations, and leaves organizations attached to the people with the knowledge. Comment. Who remains accountable is a question mark. This is an easy one to answer. It is always the human. I think we're all in agreement with that one. If the concept beneath the learning is not understood, then AI fails. I should explain above, then the person using AI fails. Any thoughts on those comments, or are you in agreement?
I think I agree with all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly the one about responsibility.
We had a couple of questions earlier on. At what point... sorry, I'll ask that one. Ronan, how is the use of AI specifically impacting your job at the university?
I think, well, the university, my university, and the university sector that I can see is doing what universities often do, which is being very responsive and responding too late and defensive. The most information we've had about AI is instructions to make our assessments secure. So a year ago, University of Melbourne sent out instructions that all student assessments, at least 50%, should be AI proof. So during my academic career, I've seen a pivot away from exams in the name of, exams are very old hat. We need to get students to written assessments. And now there is a rush back to exams in order to because exams, presumably students writing in a hall with a pen, the way I did it and the way probably some of our listeners did it, there's a big rush back to that, and there's a rush to introduce alternative forms of assessment. And I'm not saying these are necessarily bad things, because it probably is good to get some of those competencies we don't want our students to lose, such as first drafting and independent critical thinking. But I would like to see universities recognize the pedagogical potential of AI at the same time as seeking to defend against it, which I think is immense and potentially profoundly disruptive of third level education, with the perils and possibilities that offers. So specifically, do you allow students to use AI in assignments, exams, and other submissions? What's your personal... I think that I certainly don't tell them to go off and use it, and my own response is still adapting. I have made my assessments 50% secure, but there are still opportunities for the students in the other 50% not to use it. I have tried to, so for example, in a course I'm doing now, I've introduced what there's a particular term for it. I can't remember what the term is, but it basically means you have an interview with the student about what they're going to be writing about. So
Okay.
It kind of tethers their use of AI. I think we should be. I'm interested in exploring ways that we can build AI into the classroom and into the assessment in positive ways, because it's here, and our students are certainly using it very, very widely, and have been probably for 4 years. And it's only a year or two ago that the university has started to catch, or whenever it came. When would it have arrived? 3 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, 4 years ago, probably the advent of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
The a question for you, in terms of parallels in history. We always say that there's parallels in history. Is there a parallel, or which is there anything in history that really reflects this or parallels this in your mind, where we had such uncertainty and change coming at us at such a rapid pace? Is this a special time, or do we just think it's a special time?
Well, I think that history. I think that the idea that this is going to end civilization and create mass unemployment, we've heard before, and I'm a little skeptical about that, because such predictions were made before about the internet when it arrived, computers when they arrived, and every technological innovation has led to moral panics. Moral panic about the effect it's going to have on long-established human traditions and occupations. I'm referring to the Industrial Revolution. I'm referring to the growth of computers, the arrival of television. A lot of these things, the panic about the economy is also a moral panic about the effect it's going to have on the human brain and human capacity to think. That's always happened. Doesn't mean that this time it's, just because the predictions of Armageddon didn't eventuate in the past doesn't mean that they're not right this time. They could be, but I think that there will be new competencies that are a little bit opaque at the moment, and new jobs, new skills, new requirements that will be required to shepherd and steer. Maybe some of them will be keeping AI in check, introducing necessary frictions so that we don't lose the competencies that we need to develop judgment. But just the same as lots of jobs came up around computers, and unemployment is lower now than it's ever been. I don't see that happening. That doesn't mean that we should be, you get an awful lot of techno-pessimism and techno-optimism, as I started off by saying, in both extremes, and I think we should be wary of both. But I do think there are lessons for history. I do think, for example, I pointed out the arrival of writing and what that was going to do to the human capacity for memorization, and printing, the calculator. We've got to, obviously, I'm not diminishing it. I think this is a much bigger thing than the calculator. Well, what do you think, Fergal? Do you think it's... you started off by saying Symphony 3 have been pivoting into this. You're in a business that, I guess, AI is sometimes seen as a threat to, software as a service. How do you see that?
It's an interesting question. I see it as a major opportunity, but I think I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
I think this is, as I said at the outset, I think this technology questions are what it means to be human, maybe more than others. But that's maybe me just getting to grips with it, or us getting to grips with it. One of the questions, there was a book, and you've heard me use this one before, where Kissinger and Eric Schmidt, before Kissinger passed away, wrote a book, and they had I don't know if it was a thought experiment, but they were pretty pessimistic about AI. But one of the questions they posed was, if you've got, when you're using AI in war, if you've got a general on one side who's used AI to gather all this information, the AI comes back to him and says, right, you've got to kill a million people, but you'll win the war.
Yeah.
The general doesn't have enough information to, or doesn't understand how the AI has come up with this recommendation, because it's far more intelligent than he is. So you're asking him to use his judgment.
Yeah.
on something like that. And then on the flip side, he's going, well, the general on the other side of the fence has a similar AI, and he's probably been asked to do the same thing. Now, that's a
Yeah.
very vexed question. Plausible that these kind of things are going to happen. So I
Yeah.
was going to ask about judgment. Can we have good judgment when we don't understand how a recommendation has been made? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I look, the military applications, particularly when AI combines with robotics, and we can have robot armies, which is the stuff of dystopian fiction, but
Yeah.
probably quite close. Um, and whoever kind of gets that technology first, questions of boots on the ground will be solved by in that way, and the ethical implications of military uses of AI are huge and probably beyond our pay grade today. But yeah, I mean, information, judgment, good judgment, phronesis needs information.
Yeah.
You can't be judging blind.
I'm just mindful of time. We try and get everybody. It's 5:01, I think, over there. I don't know what time it is. 9 o'clock here. So I might close out the formalities, Ronan. Happy to stay on and take any more questions that people may have. There are a few more comments, but I don't think we've got time to go through it. I've written down a whole load of things that you've human friction against AI's smoothness, strategic slowness, practical wisdom, owning responsibility, brush against the grain. Some of the nuggets you've come out with over the course of the last hour. I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I think one of the things that you do really well is force us almost to do that strategic slowness, to sit back and think about tools like AI. And get out of the day-to-day as what we're doing here today, and just think about, right, what does this really mean for us as leaders and as people in organisations. So
Well,
thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure, Fergal. Thanks for the invitation, and yeah, very happy to stay on if anyone wants to. I've also got my email there. I think you put my email on the slide, so if anyone wants to continue the conversation away from Symphony 3's BD Sauron Lock Eye, we can... I'm very happy to kind of talk to anyone about these. They're obviously really, really important issues, and talking about it in these big picture way. I'm sure people, in addition to those who've commented, have strong views and perspectives on this, and maybe different ones to me. And I'd be really keen to hear other people's views too. So please feel free
Ronan,
to...
just final plug is you do a bit of public speaking on all kinds of manner of big questions in the world. So I'm assuming people, if they're interested in having you do a talk, they can reach out to you on the email there.
Absolutely, be very happy to hear from anyone interested in that.
Right. So you're getting lots of thank yous, not so many questions, but I'll run through some of these comments while people sign off. The earth remains flat in the eyes of many. In the past, we've managed individual new technologies and the impact. Now we have a wave of new technologies happening simultaneously. Yet I remain positive. Good stuff, Frank. Tara, I wouldn't hire someone into IT that wasn't a fan of AI or refused to use AI. It's like saying you aren't going to use the cloud or the internet or a computer. Question, do you have a prediction as to what it will be like in, say, 10 million years, given it is still in its infancy as yet? I think you need a pint before you address that question.
Well, I think H.G. Wells's image of the time machine is, I can't remember how many million years ahead it was, but it was million years ahead. But one of the things that you learn from looking at the history of literature is science fiction, is that any imagination of the future always tells far more about the time it was written than what the future actually turns out to be. If you look at the imaginings of 2026, you find people of 2026, let's say 100 years ago, you find people imagining people in top hats going around in balloons above the air and things. They always say about the time. So if we were to imagine or discuss what the world would be like, even in 100 years, let alone 10 million, it would inevitably tell future historians who track down this recording a lot more about 2026 than it would about 10 million years hence.
We've had a comment from Senja. A lot of thank yous coming through, Ronan, but from Senja Barham. Wonderful to hear more humanities rather than tech-led commentary and consideration of AI. Thank you. I echo that. I think it's important that we, as I said earlier, that we sometimes put a different lens on this than just a pure tech lens. And Monceau, Ray Bradbury predicted computers teaching kids at home, no school attendance.
Well, obviously something will be lost by that, I think. Social. I've got young kids, and I think it's so important that they have socializing is such an important part of education.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. I think we've exhausted the comments. Just final thank you, Ronan. I think people have really enjoyed this.
Yeah, we did have.
So maybe we can get you back in. So I think Frank, his M was a big thumb. So maybe we get you back in a few years' time, and we can see if any of your predictions or any of your wisdom was actually wisdom, or is it just a reflection of the times we're in? So thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for attending. It was great.
Thanks very much for your time, and thanks for the invitation. Thanks all of you for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.